On today's episode.
Some other of the statistics, despite 3/4 of Americans having positive views on adoption, only 1/6 of American women of childbearing age reported that they would make such a choice. So it's in the abstract, thinking about other people, it's like, oh yeah, that's a really good thing. But when it's me and my pregnancy, yeah, I don't think I could do that.
Welcome to the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. People today face many opportunities and struggles when it comes to issues of life and death, marriage and family, health and science. We're here to bring a fresh biblical perspective to these issues and more. Join us now for Life Challenges.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Krista Potratz, and I'm here today with Pastors Bob Fleischman and Jeff Samuelson. And today we're going to talk about our August current events. And we have a good list of current events to talk about, the things that are going on. The first we'll talk about is, Jeff, can you fill us in a little bit on what's going on with the defunding Planned Parenthood?
We're recording this in mid-July. We'll see if anything much has changed by the beginning of August, but so far it seems pretty certain of a few things. On July 3rd, the Senate passed the reconciled version of the what Donald Trump was calling the Big Beautiful Bill, and then he signed it on July 4th. And included in this, along with many other things, was a provision that removed all federal funding for Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood. So that basically saying no federal money at all is going to go to Planned Parenthood. Previously, there had been provisions that would keep federal money from paying for abortions through Medicaid and therefore keeping that money from Planned Parenthood. But this was the first time they simply said, no, none of it's going at all to Planned Parenthood in any way. And that's the reality that should be the one that actually works, because money is fungible. If you're giving $100,000 to this clinic and you're saying, but don't use it for this thing, it's still going to end up supporting that thing because you're just going to move your money around in order to make sure things get paid for or whatever. So that was the big thing. One thing that pro-lifers were a little less happy about, the original bill that had passed the House banned or removed that funding for a period of 10 years. Apparently, it was a provision of the reconciliation process that they were using to get this through the Senate, that it had to be changed to just 1 year. So that raises some questions. Are they going to be able to keep that provision in next year and in future years when it comes up? Will this be in any way something that's permanent, or is this going to be something that has to be fought again every year? So lots of big questions there, particularly with a lot being up in the air about Republican control of the House and the Senate and so forth. A few things should be made clear, though, that this in and of itself doesn't cripple or destroy Planned Parenthood. In states where the state legislature is overwhelmingly pro-abortion, they can decide, okay, well, we're going to make up what the federal government isn't giving them. We're going to fund these organizations. There are private organizations that, of course, could step up, or even individuals, and replace that funding. But it is interesting that Planned Parenthood itself has said that they could lose or be forced to close 1/3 of their clinics as a result of this. Now, I suspect that a fair amount of that was scaremongering, trying to tell everybody, oh, no, you can't do this because it's going to hurt us so much. But I actually read something just this morning that suggested that there might be some reality to that, because apparently their finances are not quite as healthy as they might want them to be, and that they are in fact quite dependent on federal funding. So that would be a good thing as far as we're concerned, because Planned Parenthood is the number one purveyor of abortions in the United States and does a lot of other stuff that we're not happy about as well.
It presented a unique dilemma. I give you a little bit different flavor of it. There's a requirement that, I think it's on the county level, that states are supposed to be also providing for indigent services like some testing, pap smears, STI testing, birth control, provide birth control services and so forth. And even though the Big Beautiful Bill never says the words Planned Parenthood, it clearly says that any agency getting over $800,000, and if they're involved in abortion, they're defunded. So it effectively defunds them. And that's a good thing. I mean, I'm very good. I find that the Trump administration likes to use a method of creating change by forcing you into a predicament. Whether we're talking about tariffs or whatever else is going on, the predicament is supposed to create a positive change that's going to hurt a lot right now, but later on it'll become more natural. Like in the area of tariffs. Now, I used to work for a steel foundry many years ago in the lab, and I remember how we were just being beat up over foreign steel. And so eventually the steel foundry I worked for went out of business, and not surprising. And now, of course, between tariffs and everything, there's this big push to try to bring steel production back to the United States. By defunding America's largest private provider of services that take the life of unborn children, they also have created this dilemma of how are counties going to be able to still meet their obligation to the indigent. And so I can see why people are panicking. I can see why states are saying, well, then we're going to fund it and everything. The beauty of it is I believe when push comes to shove, even the most liberal states are going to finally say, we don't have an endless pot of gold here. On the county level, we'll fund STD testing, we'll fund pap smears, we may even fund birth control. But it's just too politically divisive to fund abortions on the more intimate state level. So I think this is going to be a technique that's going to push counties to be a little bit more imaginative. If Planned Parenthood wants to stick to their guns and stay in the abortion business, they're just out. It's time for them to move on. They become obsolete. So I think that that's kind of like a grand plan and all this. I didn't read all 1,000 pages of the big, beautiful bill, which I never liked that terminology, but I did some summary work on it. And I've always, even though I haven't been in the steel industry in 45, 50 years, I still follow what kind of goes on in that industry. And I see the same thing happening. It's trying to create a predicament so that it forces ingenuity to solve it. And I think that that's a very good thing. And in the process, we're going to save some lives. The Hyde Amendment always was prohibiting money going for these purposes, and liberals have always found a way to circumvent it. And this big, beautiful bill, I think, just cut that one off.
It's hard to imagine, though, kind of like you were saying, too, that this will be the end of Planned Parenthood. We've seen them, too, to kind of move into other spaces as well, offering different hormones and things in the transgender area. And so it will just be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, along with Bob's comment about devolving things down to like the county level and such. Americans with a more libertarian or constitutionalist bent are going to be hopeful that something like this is also just starting to get the federal government out of the business of paying for things that the federal government was never designed to be paying for. And that would be a good thing. I think many people would agree if this is just the first step in that direction and helping us being more of a federal type of system that we were originally designed to be. Which brings up an interesting little sidelight, which I don't know got a whole lot of attention. So Donald Trump signed the legislation on the 4th of July, which was a Friday. Next business day is Monday the 7th. On that day, 2 Planned Parenthood groups, I think Massachusetts and Utah, filed suit in a federal court in Massachusetts asking for an injunction. They got from the federal judge there within hours. There was no opinion. The judge simply issued a temporary restraining order saying that the administration has to continue paying for all of these things that the law has just said they cannot pay for. And that is just such a constitutional travesty. Courts cannot tell the executive to spend money that the legislature has not actually given them authority to spend. That's not the way it works. And that's not the way the judicial system is supposed to work either. If it doesn't get overturned immediately, it's just going to blow up in some way or another. But it indicates how existential this is to certain people with a certain political bent on things, and that makes it worth paying attention to, or continuing to pay attention to it, not just thinking, oh, we won, that's it.
I was thinking of Jeff's political science background when I was watching the debate going on between the big, beautiful bill in the House of Representatives, and then when it went over to the Senate, and how the Senate has a different set of priorities than the House of Representatives when it deals with this. House of Representatives is supposedly perhaps the closest representative to the demographics of your state, whereas the Senate gets 2 reps. Whether your state is made up of many different cultures and attitudes, you just have 2 reps. And I always thought it was part of the genius of the way the Constitution is structured and the checks and balances and so forth. But as they were going back and forth, and then hearing Jeff comment about getting the federal government out of funding all these things, that's one of the things that's going to be a benefit, is that I think when these issues come back to the state to be dealt with, and then get it down on the county level, when it gets to that level, it gets close enough now that now you have a real say. So now you can show up at your meeting, you can say, I don't want this. I don't want this in my school district. I don't want this in my county. You can do that. Whereas everything you were hoping for in the House of Representatives bill got turned around or undone or modified in the Senate version, and you have no say. You can on the big election of your senators, but it's part of the complexity of how the system works. So I think anytime we can bring these issues back into our communities, especially when they're so volatile, like abortion and I mean, even other things that we get into, whether it be marriage, gay marriage, or porn stores and stuff like that, I think you get those on the community level, I think you have a better chance of getting your voice known.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see how everything plays out. Another topic that we wanted to talk about was the role of adoption and women's pregnancy making decision. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, this was prompted by a long article that was published just within the last few weeks in a law journal. It was titled Informing Choice, The Role of Adoption in Women's Pregnancy Decision-Making. It's interesting because it takes a close and detailed and well-researched with statistics and surveys and things like that approach to the question of why is it that adoption is not the option that pregnant women are choosing as much, and how does that relate to statistically to abortion, the choice to abort a child, and why is that? And the third big part of the paper is, well, what can legislatures and such do about this? What's the political response there? And that's not so much what interested me, but it was the talk of adoption. I mean, we are pro-adoption here, very much so.
Yep.
And I remember after Dobbs, there were lots of people saying, well, we think it just makes sense that adoption levels are going to go up a lot after that, because women who are not able to get abortions are going to place their children for adoption. And haven't been seeing that so much. And we'd like to see more of it, but there's still a lot of children that are going losing their lives to abortion. In fact, the rate of abortions to adoptions in the United States is currently about 50 abortions to every 1 adoption.
Wow.
And that's despite the fact that 86% of Americans report a favorable to extremely favorable view of adoption. But from the perspective of women with unexpected pregnancies, adoption is generally speaking a non-option. Very few women consider, much less choose, adoption. In 2020, so this was statistics from 5 years ago, just shy of 20,000 infants were placed for private domestic non-step parent adoption, in contrast to at least 930,000 abortions.
Yeah, I mean, it's And the crazy thing is it's never changed. We've been in the pregnancy care business for a long time now, and we knew early on that you can sit down with a woman coming in pregnant, and if you talk to her about adoption, she would rather abort her child than to imagine somebody adopting her child. And our experience has been on a practical level, it was almost kind of like a surge in responsibility, like I could never trust somebody else to do that. So I'd rather have that child aborted. And of course, by their thinking is, we'll abort the child before there's any cognizant understanding of what's happening. And then, we relieve the child of potential problems. We make things, easier for everybody by their thinking. And of course, the child has to die. In the article that Jeff had linked, they were talking about how people, will raise questions about, talking about adoption doesn't relieve the mother of the stress and turmoil of carrying the pregnancy all the way through and so forth. My experience on a very practical level is that they don't think that way. That's not the way they think. They think in the moment. And in the moment, I'm pregnant. At this time, I'm pregnant. I didn't want to be pregnant. I wasn't figuring on being pregnant. I don't want the pregnancy to continue. When you're arguing for adoption, and we try everything we can, but when you make the case for adoption, what they're hearing is the pregnancy continues. You're carrying the baby. Everything that they came in with a mindset of being opposed to. And so I think, I thought the study was great. It was a good paper, a fascinating paper. But I do think it challenges us to kind of deal with the real issues at hand, and that is somehow they need to be more greatly incentivized to carry the pregnancy through with somebody who wants to adopt. And I know there are plenty of people out there to adopt because we hear from them a lot. But how do you give them the incentive to do it?
Mm-hmm. Some other of the statistics, despite 3/4 of Americans having positive views on adoption, only 1/6 of American women of childbearing age reported that they would make such a choice. So it's in the abstract, thinking about other people. It's like, oh yeah, that's a really good thing. But when it's me and my pregnancy, I don't think I could do that. And, the article discusses, what are some of the reasons why that is? Some of it is inaccurate information. Women think, if I place my child for adoption, then I have no choice, no control. There's, I'll never have a chance to connect with the child again. They have very wrong ideas about how it works. They might feel that, once I do that, I'm coerced, which is no longer the case. And they can address external things like, if abortion is available as an option, then that's a major figure there. There's still a stigma for a lot of people on adoption. It's like, you gave up your baby. You must have been in really bad shape. You must have been pretty confident you couldn't be a good mother. And they don't want that kind of stigma, which shouldn't be there in the first place, but it's there. Increasingly now, there's a social pressure to if you're going to bear the child, to be the parent. There's something wrong if you're not going to do that. Sometimes people get the message from their family, you have this baby, don't expect any help from us. And there are trusted professionals who might very well be saying, no, that's not what you want to do. That's not a good thing there. And then, of course, there are the internal considerations. Pretty much what Bob was talking about. I'm going through a lot of distress right now with this pregnancy and the long-term thing of adoption. That doesn't sound like it's going to relieve my distress. And then there's that sense of, what's going to be best for the child? Don't I know what's best for a child? How could I send him to somebody else and have that happen? So there's a lot in the article, and it's interesting. And if you have an interest in adoption, particularly adoption policy and such, you probably find it worth a read.
It kind of inspired me to again explore how we deal with the topic as an organization, because there is, for the sake of the child who loses a life, if there's an abortion, I'd like to see if we could more critically examine how to help this, because the numbers were, it is a staggering statistic, 50 to 1, and how tragic.
Yeah. Another topic that we wanted to talk about was the lab-grown sperm and eggs. And I think this was an article that was maybe Japanese scientists that were talking about how far they think they are away from growing these sperm and eggs in the lab.
Well, I think first of all, remember what they're talking about. We've gone the cycle of surrogate parenting. We've gone, we're IVF. This is like one step beyond. Now we're talking about not involving a male and a female, but actually bringing everything down to its what they would call totipotent level that would allow finding the necessary elements in stem cells that you can bring the combination to result in life. There were all sorts of things about the story that struck me. Like, first of all, at Osaka University, the professor said, I think we're 7 years away. Every time I see that, I always giggle because you know how we talk numerology in the Bible, like 7 or 10, 10's a number of completeness, 7. It's a little bit like this. Whenever I see the number 7 and 10 in ethics, it always means we don't have the foggiest idea when this is going to happen, because 7 is forever.
Did they say that 7 years ago? Do we know?
Yeah, I know. Well, and it's crazy. But the other thing is that when you look at some of the quandaries that are going to be wrong, first of all, think about the benefits. This is what they tell you. The benefit of this is same-sex couples. They can have a child. A single parent can have a child. You combine this with the artificial womb, a man can have a child. And I mean, it's got all of these possibilities. Almost all of them support a perverted view of the family. Not a biblical view of the family, but support a perverted view of the family. But as I read it, and this did not come out of the article, I've been reading through the book of Leviticus, which tells you how badly I need excitement in my life. I mean, because Leviticus is a tough read. You're reading all the regulations, and I'm reading all this, and you get through the sexual sins in Leviticus where you're not supposed to sleep with a close family, blood relative, and all of those kinds of things. And generally the logic has been there's just problems with that. Now, one of the things that they hinted at could be a problem, a practical problem, they don't call it an ethical problem, but a practical problem is what are the offspring going to look like 4 generations down the road? Because if I can't, and I'm going to preface this by telling everybody, I do not have a sister. But if I were to copulate with my sister, and it raises the possibility of profound birth defects or birth defects coming down the road. What do you think is going to happen if I go the only thing closer, and that essentially to copulate with yourself? What do you think's going to happen down the line when you've extracted your male and female elements in procreation out of your own system? And that was part of the design of God of being fruitful and multiplying and so forth. And this whole thing is designed to circumvent. It's funny because when I read it, it's kind of like, is there any other possible way I could look at everything God instructed and say, let's do the opposite? And this is getting pretty close.
It was interesting that the opening line of the article that talked about this had the interesting verb. Scientists are just a few years from creating viable human sex cells in the lab. Creating, as though they are making something from scratch.
Yeah.
When in fact all they're doing is working with the powers and potentialities that God, the real creator, put into cells and DNA from the very beginning. But they want to play God. And like with so many things, it's the old problem of seemingly only being concerned with, can we do this? When they should first be asking, should we do this?
Right.
Is this good? Is this right? Is this smart? And as you so well expressed, this is messing with things that we as Christians, and really all humans, should be profoundly uncomfortable with having anybody mess with. The line has been crossed. It's in the rearview mirror. We hope there'd be some way to bring us back at some point, but they're barreling ahead.
And I've wondered, is the solution to just encourage everybody out there in Life Challenges podcast land to get on your ethics boards and kind of put a stop to this. No, I don't think that that's the solution. I've thought about what I think is the real solution here, and because I've wrestled with this for a long time, and that is when you've got people who have gone into this, we can do anything we want, and of course, if you're living for the world, I get it. I can make the logical connections. I see let's experiment. Let's try. If we're living for this world, but if you understand your Christianity, if you're more than a thimbleful depth to it, you recognize that this is not all there is to life. Our entire existence is to be glorifying God. So ultimately, how do you handle where the ethical train has so passed your station already? It's way down the line. How do you handle it? You handle it with the gospel. You try to connect people, again, with an understanding of how you came into existence, why you continue to exist. Like Jeff said at the beginning, we're recording this in mid-July. Tomorrow we're going to be publishing part of the Debunk series, and I just broke down a detailed thing on the creation of man, creation of woman, how that's supposed to be understood, all that kind of stuff. When you start tying all of that together, it's incredible how far we've gotten off the track. And when you're so off the track, your reality is no reality at all. You're just looking at a big, giant fantasy land that all disintegrates. And I think Christians, the only way you finally stop it is you do what we've been called to do from the very beginning, talk about Jesus.
I mean, I think I just look at it too as it's like you're taking God's perfect design with man and woman and creating new life. And then it's like, it's like a kid, mom and dad has maybe started something. Okay, like I want to do it now. Like I want to, it's my turn. And even though like it's already kind of done, you're trying to do it now just in a different way. And it's not the way God intended.
It reminds me of an old joke, which I'm not remembering completely, so I probably won't tell it so well. But it's basically that this group of scientists have decided that they have figured out the process, that they know enough about how evolution happened and everything like that they can create life on their own. They've figured out how, and so they invite God for a showdown and say, okay, well, if you can do it, we can too. And he agrees. Okay, let's do that. So he says, go ahead. What do you need? And they say, okay, well, first we're going to take some dirt. And God says, wait, where are you getting the dirt from? The idea being that he created the dirt. They're not starting from nothing. They're still working with something that he created. And just reminds me of that.
Go back to Exodus. Read when Moses was sent to Pharaoh to let the people go. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of the joke. The idea is Pharaoh brings out his magicians. And so, he kind of replicates a couple of these things. And then all of a sudden, we kind of get beyond the ability of the magicians. And it seemed deliberate. But my point is that Pharaoh had hardened his heart and demonstrated that at every turn. When you read all of the things, everything that's involved with this, it's called an IVG process as opposed to IVF. Everything involved with the IVG process. And
in vitro gametogenesis.
Yes, that's it. It's very good.
I practiced that.
Yeah. And that's what it is. But if you read everything involved with it, it's almost kind of like man is playing the role of Pharaoh. My heart is hardened. You tell me I can't do this. I'm doing this. You tell me I should do it this way. I'm going to do it that way. It's like everything is just outright rebellion. And at some point, somebody's going to have to put their foot down. The other thing, if you want to throw an ethical wrench into all of this, just remember, if your sphere of influence is your community, your county, your state, maybe even your federal government, but it doesn't extend to Japan, China, wherever they want to work on this stuff, they're just going to keep plowing ahead in those areas. So you do what you can do, and what you can do is to, connect people with God. And let it go from there.
Yeah, one of the scariest things in this article was not so much about what they are capable of or expect to soon be capable of, but I can't remember who it was who made the comment, but it was somebody who was talking about, well, yeah, we're not sure if we should do this, we're not sure if we should do that, or whatever, but basically was comfortable. Well, it depends on what society is comfortable with.
Yeah, an ever-changing mark.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, that's not an ethical standard. That's just, yeah, we'll do whatever is permitted, whatever is possible.
Allowed.
Yeah. And that's not comforting at all.
Yeah. Well, the final thing we wanted to talk about today was an article that Bob had found on prenatal infants feeling pain. And I think they've maybe have discovered that they do feel pain, but maybe they don't realize that it's pain, and just the ethical, findings with that.
Well, and the article dealt with preemies. So we're talking about prematurely born infants. And when a child is prematurely born, at different stages, they're basically saying there seems to be the presence of pain, but their level of cognition, their level of understanding it, translating it is different. And when I think when I wrote the little explanation note on it, I even said we've been talking about this for years about unborn children experiencing pain, and of course everyone's always taken some sort of solace that they don't understand it as they would if they were born. I thought the article was kind of interesting in that they suggested that it might actually be worse. It might be a worse acknowledgement because they don't have the cognitive skills to compartmentalize, to classify, to do all that. And I've often felt that way. I mean, it's kind of like fear. There are things that you're afraid of, and then as you begin to understand it, you might still fear it, but it might turn into more like respect, like electricity. I remember the first time a neighbor was helping us build a room in our basement when I was a kid, and he accidentally touched the metal rule to the two screws on the electrical outlet, and it sparks and the power went out. It blew the breaker, and it terrified me. And then after a while, he began to teach me how it worked and how it worked. And so your fear becomes respect, but you're still kind of fearful. Well, at its base level, it might even be more torturous of what we do to children through an abortion and premature children.
Yeah. What I related that to is like, I have been blessed that so far in my life, I have never experienced the most extreme forms of pain. But if you ever have had pain so severe, or you've observed someone, particularly someone you love, with pain so severe that you're no longer able to engage your brain to deal with it, which is, on that pain scale, when you're getting into the 8, 9, 10 there, there's no ability to process. You're just feeling the pain. That's the only thing on your mind, and you're not able to compartmentalize it. You're not able to process it and say, oh, well, this is going to go away soon, or this is only happening because of this, or once that pain medication kicks in, then I'll be okay. You're not able to do that. It is existentially upsetting. And therefore, how cruel it is to inflict that on another human being, to do that without any way of relieving that or anything like that. And that, if that is indeed the case, that these tiny children inside the womb they have the full capability of feeling the pain, but have no capability of properly processing it, then that, as you said, Bob, that makes it even worse. That's torturous.
Yeah. And if you knew that it was happening to a neighbor, you would do something about it. Mm-hmm. And it is happening to a neighbor.
Thank you both for the discussion today. And we thank all of our listeners, too, for joining us. And if you have any questions on any of these topics at all, you can reach us at lifechallenges.us. And please, if you enjoyed this episode, share the podcast We are currently in the top 25% of all podcasts. And
in the United States, we're in the top 25.
In the United States, yep, that's correct. And I just had seen yesterday that we have published over 200 episodes, 201 to be exact. Anyway, thank you to all of our listeners for everything. And we look forward to having you back next time. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. Please consider subscribing to this podcast, giving us a review wherever you access it, and sharing it with friends. We're sure you have questions on today's topic or other life issues. Our goal is to help you through these tough topics, and we want you to know we're here to help. You can submit your questions as well as comments or suggestions for future episodes at lifechallenges.us or email us at podcast@christianliferesources.com. In addition to the podcasts, we include other valuable information at lifechallenges.us, so be sure to check it out. For more about our parent organization, please visit christianliferesources.com. May God give you wisdom, love, strength, and peace in Christ for every life challenge.